There we
There
go.
it is. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everybody to Winephabet Street. Today we are talking the letter P, and it is Petit Manseng, which I probably completely said incorrectly because, we have that E without the E, and we're going to get into that conversation too, the difference between petit and petite. And so we are here. For those of you who are new, I am Lori. I am your co-host here at Winephabet Street. And I am a WSET Level 2, a Spanish wine scholar, a champagne specialist, Côte d'Aron, and I own a winery in Paso where we focus in on Cabernet Franc. And very, very excited because my dream finally came true. And I did get to process a whole half ton of Cabernet Franc to make the Blanc de Franc that I've been trying to do for years. But today we are talking Petit Manseng and with my co-host, Debbie.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Debbie Giaquindo. I'm a certified specialist of wine, a wine location specialist in port and champagne, and a certified sherry wine specialist. I am known as the Hudson Valley Wine Goddess. I'm a blogger and wine educator. I'm chairwoman of the Hudson Valley Wine and Spirits competition. I've been doing that for, over 14 years. This year will be 14 years, I think. That's a long time. And I'm partner in a restaurant in North Wildwood, New Jersey called Trio North Wildwood. And that's where you can find me all summer long, the hostess with the mostest. And with us is Lee Hartman. And Lee is from Bluestone Vineyards in Virginia, and he is going to talk to us all about Petit Manseng. But first, Lee, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. It's really great to be here and glad to be on the program. My name is Lee Hartman. I'm the winemaker at Bluestone Vineyards. I've been working this vineyard since we started it back in 2008. It's a family farm. So I've been here since 2008, about 16 years. I've been the winemaker since 2010. And very excited to be working in the industry. And here in the Shenandoah Valley, I'm the Wine Trail president for the Shenandoah Valley Wine Trail. And I also own a wine bar called Rootstock Wine Bar.
Nice name.
Oh,
I like it. I like it. All right. Before we get into Petit Manseng, we've got Elmo here, so we're going to start our little intro. All right. Well, did we go without a hitch?
I think so. I didn't hear it, though. I didn't hear any music. Did you?
Yeah, because we've got it muted now. We've learned the trick. We don't hear it, but the other people do. Yay. Yay.
So far, so good. And it's Monday, and it's a Monday after the Super Bowl. So
it should be a national holiday, in my opinion. But hey.
Yeah, right. But anyway, so Lee, welcome. And thanks so much for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about the history and the vineyard and the vision of Bluestone Vineyards?
Sure. So my parents had what I would call a hobby vineyard or a garden vineyard with some friends. It was, a row of this and a row of something else and then another thing. And none of it together really made a whole lot of sense. It was, Cabernet Sauvignon next to Chardonnay, next to Cayuga, next to all sorts of stuff. And after doing that for several years, they were making wine in the garage. They got the idea of, we know what we're doing. We should plant 10,000 of them. So that got started right at the same time that I was graduating from college. I had a degree in history, and I used to live in Europe. I wanted to move back to Europe. I thought I might actually use my degree. And they were very supportive of that. They said, until you line something up, why don't you help us start planting vines in the ground? And so I had that kind of aha moment. That's kind of a cliche amongst winemakers, that you start to realize that this bottle is just a bunch of dirt and water and sunlight. And I think that's the wildest thing ever. And I still do. And so this has become what I'm going to do until I retire.
Good for you.
Yeah, we are in the central Shenandoah Valley, so we are at a higher elevation than a lot of the states. The valley enjoys some protection on both sides from the Allegheny Mountains and the Blue Ridge Mountains, and so because of that, we are one of the driest parts of the state. We're one of the driest wine regions on the East Coast. We have cooler evenings, so when we are ripening our fruit, it still retains some really good fresh acidity, which we'll talk about here more in a bit. And that helps with things like aging potential and also with food friendliness. But yeah, very, very proud Virginia winemaker. Very, very excited to be here in the Shenandoah Valley. It's where we call home.
Awesome.
I might be down there this year.
Oh, let me know.
Probably
yeah,
not
that's
until
awesome.
fall, probably in September, but yeah.
I might be busy in September, but
Okay.
let me know.
I'll come out and help.
Awesome.
I'll come out.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So we know that, I don't know how far west it went, but growing up on the East Coast, all we ever heard growing up was Virginia is for lovers. But now it's really becoming known for wine lovers too. I mean, Virginia really is starting to make a name for itself in terms of a wine destination. Yeah,
it's a real growing industry. It took a really big growth about 10 years ago. It grew a lot. And just recently, it seems like we've had more and more starting to open up again, which is exciting. We're now closer to 400 than 300 wineries. I think we were winery number 191 or something. And about the time we opened up, so did a ton of others. Monticello, which is just on the other side of the Blue Ridge Mountains. That wine region was just named Wine Region of the Year by wine enthusiasts. So we're all very proud of them here in the state. And we're also starting to not only have an identity as a state, but we're also starting to get some recognition farther out for different wine regions within the state. So there's Monticello, which is going to be a bit hotter, and they grow bigger, more muscular reds than we do. Here in the valley, we're able to do things like Riesling and other really nice higher acid varietals, things that maybe aren't so muscular and brawny, although we still make some pretty awesome Petit Verdots and Merlots, Cab Francs. And then up in Northern Virginia, they're doing some really great stuff there right outside of DC. And even on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake, all the way down to the North Carolina border, people are doing really interesting stuff. And it's not just all Virginia wine. Even though we have that identity, we all have, local microclimates and terroirs that we're able to work with.
Well, Michael was saying here that there were 7 Cabernet Francs from Virginia that were entered in his 5th annual Cab Franc wine competition this year.
Oh, cool.
So that's great.
Yeah. And which competition is that?
It's a competition Michael has around Cab Franc Day, which Lori started.
Awesome.
And there were 7 Virginia Cab Francs entered, so that's
good.
Pretty historical.
Yeah. We make some really good ones. I think if you asked around, and I'm gonna get emails about saying this probably, but I think if you asked around the state of Virginia if we should have a state wine grape or a signature grape, I would definitely throw Cab Franc into that mix. I think it's something that most of us are growing. Most of us are making into wine. And there's so many cool styles you can make. Everything from kind of a Nouveau style to really heavy Bordeaux stuff to things that are almost more Pinot-like. It's just an awesome grape. I've got 3 acres of it in my front yard. I love working with that stuff.
Yay! But we are here now. This is very, very rare for me to say, okay, we're not going to talk Cab Franc, because I will talk Cab Franc all day, every day, all the time. But we are here to talk about Petit Manseng. And so tell us what other grape varieties, we know that you do the Cab Franc. What other do you grow, and how do they relate to Petit Manseng? How do they relate to each other? Is it a great grape variety for Virginia? Because I listened to a podcast that it's big in Arizona now, Petit Manseng.
Petit Manseng? Oh. Really?
Yeah. I was just listening to another podcast, and it was a producer in Arizona, and he, I'm driving, and he's like, oh yeah, we do a lot of Petit Manseng here. We're like, what? Really? Okay. I don't know. So what about Virginia does that?
When I think of Virginia, I think Petit Manseng. So
it's really found a home here. We've been Bluestone has been working with it since 2015 with our first vintage, and I know others have been working with it for years prior to that. It seems to do well here. The clusters are very loose. It's called Petit Manseng because the berries are really small, just like the berries on Petit Verdot are really small. And so when you have those small berries, you often have a looser cluster. And that means that if the berries aren't all so tightly bunched as they can be with some varietals, even to the inside of that cluster, it has an easier time drying out and not having issues with mold or mildew or rot. There's a lot of things that we worry about in the vineyard. We worry about rainfall. We worry about wildlife, not only birds and deer, but we've had almost every mammal outside of an orca whale in our vineyard at some point. And those are things that we have to deal with all the time. But the number one thing that we worry about every week of the growing season is some sort of a fungal problem. So when you have these really loose clusters with really small berries, it just it goes so much farther than any kind of spray that you'd want to use to fight those things. If you're able to think ahead and plant a varietal that can do some of those things on its own, it'll save you a lot of heartache in the long run. It's also a very fun grape. We have other varietals that do well here. In my front yard, we have Chardonnay, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Chambourcin, and Petit Manseng. And then here on this property, about a half mile down the road, we have a lot of other stuff too. But Petit Manseng, it's almost everywhere has Chardonnay, right? We can't really call ourselves the home of Chardonnay. I think Sonoma and Burgundy and Napa and lots of other places might have a thing or two to say about that. But Petit Manseng, it's a beautifully aromatic varietal. You don't have to be a wine connoisseur to enjoy it. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it also it can be made into a wide variety of styles because of its some of its physiological properties. You can make it into a dessert. You can make it dry wine. It's fun in a blend, and so yeah, I think it's found a real foothold here in Virginia and in all corners.
Yeah. So what kind of approach do you have in the vineyards to sustainability and environmental stewardship?
So just like I was talking about, if you plant the correct thing up front, that's the most important thing you can possibly do. It's better to kind of that ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure thing. Mm-hmm. If you plant something here that doesn't want to do well and is prone to rot and is prone to a lot of these other issues, it's going to be an uphill battle every single year, and you're going to end up running the tractor more. You're going to run the sprayer more. You're going to have a lot of those challenges. So we try to think up front what does this look like in 5 years? What does it look like in 10 years? Once everything is brought in the door, there are a lot of small things that we do. Starting several years ago, we canned some wine for the first time. I think that is a really important thing. I think that canned wine is a lot of fun. You're able to take them backpacking. You can take them to the beach. You can take them to the pool. But also, they're very easily recyclable, and they don't weigh a lot. Glass bottles can weigh as much or more than just the wine itself. So then you're shipping not only your product, but just a bunch of glass all over the world, and that can also be very problematic. So we do cans, we do kegged wine. If you would like, you can buy a one-time purchase of a growler and come to our tasting room and fill it up several times. We think that's important.
Now, in a growler, how long does the wine keep? I'm just curious. Like, is it something that, like a bottle of wine, you open it and you probably have say a 2-day lifespan on it? What's the growler?
Well, it as with all things wine and vine, it depends.
Okay.
But I would say you should probably consume it sometime in the next week. These aren't wines to put away in the cellar anyway. They're fun. I think that sometimes our industry puts too much of a premium on, this wine is going to be excellent 15 years from now. It's like, well, that's really helpful 15 years from now, but maybe wine can also be delicious today. And so when we fill up those kegs or fill up those cans, they're meant for now. And a lot of wines that I enjoy are meant for now. So so that's also something that we do. Yeah. We also we have my wine bar in town. We decided to have a more central location. People still come out here, and they should. There's something really magical about drinking wine 100 feet from where it was grown. But also, there's something nice about getting some of that traffic just to stay closer into town, so it doesn't a little bit less of traffic problems with the environment.
Wonderful. So, do we know where Petit Manseng originated from? Is it related to Gros Manseng? And what are similarities, differences?
Yeah, so I believe it is a mutation of Gros Manseng, and so as the name would imply, that the berries are a little bit smaller. Often, when you have smaller berries, you'll also have more concentration of flavors. And if you're working with something like Petit Verdot, because you have these really small berries, the ratio of skin to juice is really, really great. And so because of that, you're able to make this really dark, concentrated style wine. Similarly with Petit Manseng, you will have lots and lots of skin per volume. And there are also very concentrated flavors there as well. When we process our Petit Manseng, we actually over the last several years we've kind of changed up how we process it. But these really small berries don't want to let out a lot of juice. So it used to be, because it's such an aromatic varietal, we thought we'd kind of lean into that, and we would crush in the stem and leave it on the skins for several hours and extract as much aromatics and as much texture as we could before pressing. As it turned out, that's not a bad thing, and some people like that style a lot. But we ended up whole cluster pressing it for a number of years, just to make the juice as clean as possible, make sure that we weren't over extracting. My friend Joy Ting talks about how there's kind of a pina colada characteristic to this wine sometimes, when it almost gets to a comical level of aromatics and richness. So we were trying to avoid that. We wanted something that had some subtlety and had some real character outside of just this very loud, heavy amount of coconut and pineapple stuff in your glass. So when you do that, then when you whole cluster press, you get much less juice. So now what we do is we destem, but we don't crush, and we load that into the press. It gives us more volume, but it also doesn't have such heavy extraction.
Oh, very interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
I think leading into next, we should maybe taste a little bit.
Oh, sure.
I don't have one of your Petit Mansengs because you couldn't ship it to me because of the stupid laws regarding shipping. But
talk to your state representatives.
Oh, please. I'm not from New Jersey, so I really I have a hard time with New Jersey on a lot of issues. I'm from New York, but
fun fact for you, I've always said a lot of people don't know who their representative is. I think it's important for your representative to know who you are. And for my representative, I manage a vineyard for him. So it's very helpful. But I'm in his yard every week.
But I did visit the Northern Virginia wine region in September, and I have a Fabellini. Fabioli. Yep. Petit Manseng that I had purchased there. But please show everybody your bottle.
Yeah, Doug makes great stuff. I'm glad to have him here on the show. So this is our Petit Manseng. This is our current vintage of 2021. So with this current, I'm sorry.
I just was saying 2021. So
I have a 2022.
Okay.
So
yep. So we interesting thing about Petit Manseng, these tiny concentrated berries packed full of flavor. They're also packed full of two other things that are important in winemaking, and that is sugar and acid. So here on the East Coast, sometimes we have a really hard time getting our grapes fully ripe. And so sometimes a little bit of additional sugar might be needed to get an appropriate level of alcohol. And sometimes when we do get our grapes ripe enough, we need to use some tartaric acid to try to make sure that it's not flat. It still has a bit of a backbone to it, and it drinks well and it ages well. It goes well with food. Petit Manseng every single year has more sugar and more acid than any other varietal that we work with. So sometimes, where our Chardonnay might have trouble getting above 20 or 21 or 22 bricks, and bricks is a way of saying percent residual sugar, roughly. Petit Manseng, we have to pick it before it gets too ripe. This stuff comes in at 13.9% alcohol, and it still has 2% residual sugar to it.
Wow.
Sometimes because of the amount of sugar, now remember, yeast eat sugar and they produce carbon dioxide and alcohol. And because of the amount of acid that is in the juice, sometimes the yeast just say, nope, I'm done. We give up. And then there's some residual sugar. One of the nice things about that, even if you're sugar averse like I am, I'm not real big on sweet wines, particularly in this 2 to 3% ballpark. I do love a good dessert wine. There's so much acid here that it really helps bring some balance to the wine. If you think about wine balance, and this is true for food generally speaking, like a seesaw. And on one side you have the body of the wine, how rich is it, how sweet is it, and then on the other side you have the structure of the wine plus acid. So if something is tasting too acidic, maybe by adding a little bit of sugar to it, you can bring some balance. And maybe you don't want to add sugar, and I don't want to add sugar to a lot of my wines. So maybe what you do is you use oak, and oak has a certain level of sweetness to it, even if it's not adding sugar. Or maybe what you do instead of adding something into this side is you subtract some acid on this side. So maybe your wine goes through a malolactic fermentation. So maybe that malic acid is changed to a weaker acid like lactic acid, and that helps bring balance. So this wine is a challenge every year because of having so much acidity and so much sugar. And at the same time, it almost kind of finds itself. Now, that being said, this is the sweetest Petit Manseng I've ever made. It's at 2.1% residual sugar. The year after it, if you are into a drier style wine, that one is 0.0% sugar. It is bone dry. It is closer to 15% alcohol. It is a monster of a wine. And we also didn't filter it. It is meant for a very particular kind of wine drinker, somebody who just loves some screaming acid. The best one that we've ever made was from 2019, where it was at 0.8% residual sugar. So its level of sweetness, you wouldn't taste the sweetness at all if you were just enjoying a glass. But if you had it in a lineup of other dry wines, then it would stand out to you a bit more. It's just really, really well balanced wine, and sometimes the wine finds where it needs to be.
So, what is the aromatic profile of it? Like, I get some tropical fruits in this
for
wine.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, definitely kind of that pina colada character, a lot of pineapple. We do to try to work with that acidity. And with this aromatic profile, we barrel ferment all of our Petit Manseng, so that helps bring a little bit of weight to the equation, and it also helps kind of frame some things nicely. I think you have those tropical notes of pineapple and other exotic fruits, some stone fruit in there. But because of the barrels, you're also able to get a little bit of that oak. I think some of the vanilla and also coconut characteristic.
Yeah, I don't know how this is done, and I can't find the alcohol percentage on it. But and I'll look later and stuff. But it does have a sweetness to it, like. But then it's got the acidity on the finish. That's just like zinging you.
That's one of the reasons we stopped crushing into stemming and letting it soak on the skins. It's a great way to extract some really cool character and to give some texture, but Petit Manseng can't help but be the most aromatic and biggest white wine in your portfolio. It can't help itself. So we don't need to push it even further in that direction. Although a couple years ago, we took it way far in that direction, and we made one barrel of what's known as an orange wine, or a skin contact white wine. So we left it on the skins for 3 weeks, and so if you drink it, it comes across your palate like a red wine would, because it was soaked on the skins and with the seeds, which were fully ripened. And but it still has those aromatics, very, very intense, tropical fruit particularly.
That must have been interesting.
It's a very interesting wine. Yeah. It is not an everyday wine, but it is a really interesting wine. I enjoy it a lot. If that's something of interest to you, we do still have about 5 cases left.
Wow. If I get down there in September, maybe.
Yeah. It's part of our vineyard site series, which is my family allows me 1 or 2 wines a year where I get to do like experimental batches of stuff. Nice. It's always fun. When you're a winemaker, you get one chance to do this every year. So don't mess it up. But but at the same time, you still you want to get better at this, and you want to try new things. And so sometimes you have to carve out a little corner of the winery to have fun and do interesting stuff.
Absolutely. And so what type of environment does Petit Manseng enjoy? Like, what soil does it like? Climate? What's its water needs? What is it looking for in the vineyard?
So we, as I said, I got started here in 2008. This hill was pretty much completely blank, and we've filled it in since then. Unless something goes horribly wrong, this is the only winery I've ever worked at, and it's also the only winery I probably will ever work at. Christmas is going to be weird that year if I'm not working here anymore. But we so we planted our Petit Manseng in 2019, 2020, I think, and it seems to do really well here. We are called Bluestone because it's a local nickname for limestone. And so our place is just chock full of it. If you look at, especially here on the south and the western side of this hill in particular, if you look at all of our posts in the wintertime when there's no vegetation in the canopy, just no two posts go in the same direction. They're all a little bit off. And that's because there are pieces of limestone in our hill that are the size of softballs and the size of Volkswagens. I mean, it was a real challenge getting everything in. But because of that, we have really well-drained soils, and it is we get a half a foot less rain on this side of the mountain than they do on the other side of the mountain. So while it is drier here, and we had a pretty severe drought in 2023 that lasted a couple of months, particularly during ripening season. So it was a challenge, but our wine that came out of it is delicious. The vines didn't seem to struggle, and on the other side of the mountain where they do get some more rain, it seems to do really well there too.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that I would want to plant it in a place that is too that retains too much water. I wouldn't advise you to plant any kind of vineyard.
No clay.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure. We haven't had to deal with that so much here, but also, here in the Valley, we do brag a bit about how dry and how cool it is, and that does a lot of really wonderful things for us. But it is a double-edged sword for sure. Sometimes it gets too cold here in the Valley, and two varietals that do really well for us up here at Bluestone, I wouldn't recommend you plant everywhere in the Valley because they are a little bit more sensitive to extreme colds, are Merlot and Petit Manseng.
Okay.
Yeah. There are some sites here in the Valley. It does awesome. And there are a lot of sites on the other side of the mountain that also really seems to thrive. But that is a consideration to make sure. And so because of that, it is at the very top of our hill where there's no possibility for cold air to really pool. Where I'm looking now, we have our Vidal Blanc planted. And Vidal Blanc is a hybrid of Trebbiano, which is grown in Italy. It's the same grape that in France is called Uni Blanc, and that is used in cognac production. But here in North America, Vidal is the biggest grape that is used for ice wines in Ontario and in New York. So when we were looking at a place looking for some grapes that would do well in a cold spot, we thought, well, if they can grow this in Canada, we'll be okay. Petit Manseng, on the other hand, that would not be a good plant to put there. So we put it at the very crest of the hill. Sits at 1,400 feet elevation, and no cold pockets there. No pockets for water to sit either.
Okay,
great. As Lori was talking earlier about petite versus petite. With an E, without an E. Do you see any confusion with that? Like, with Petit Verdot, Petit Syrah?
Sure. I've only ever heard petite. Okay. For Verdot and for Petit Manseng. Yeah. Now,
but without the E.
Right.
That's correct.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Now I will tell you that of the regrets in life, I probably should have paid more attention in French class in high school. And I lived in Germany, so my German is much better than my French, and that is to say, is still not very good. But anyway, I've always heard petite.
Okay. Is there any? Do you know why some have the E, some don't? Like, what is it? Where it's coming from? What like?
I would imagine it would
confusing thing.
Sure. I think it does confuse a lot of people who are native English speakers, because we don't have masculine and feminine, or in German they have masculine, feminine, and neutral. There it's instead of just having the word the, or the word or a anything, is
right.
un or un, and so that would change how those things are pronounced, I suppose.
Do you think that the E means like masculine? Do you think that's what the difference is? Like, I'm just curious. I have no idea.
I unfortunately have a degree in history, and so I could talk to you about some French history, but as far as
why there's an E after it,
why there's an E, or
join the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So when you're processing the fruit, you talked about how it's super tiny clusters, and on the vine there's openings so the air can go through. So whatever, but when you're ready to harvest, what are you basically looking for in terms of this is the time to harvest? What are you looking for phenologically and physiologically in that grape for you to determine, okay, it's time for us to harvest?
Sure. When it is harvest season, as you know, it's kind of it's a flood of information coming to you all at once, because we grow 11 or 12 varietals here. We grow enough varietals that I'm not exactly sure how many varietals that we have. And that could be a challenge, especially when, not only are you looking at something early in the season like Chardonnay, you also have, Chardonnay that you're picking for sparkling, and you have Chardonnay that you're picking for barrel ferment or steel ferment. You're picking Chardonnay for clients. And so there's a lot of different parameters for all of these different things. We do make 4 different Chardonnays. We only make 1 Petit Manseng. So that is a challenge, but it also simplifies things a lot. When you are looking at ripening any kind of fruit, or if whether it's in your garden or if you're looking at a vineyard, earlier, as things are progressing, post veraison, and for any viewers who don't know, veraison is when the berries turn from kind of a bright lime green and they're really hard. They start to soften up, and they'll change to whatever their ultimate color would be. Whether it's a white, it'll turn kind of a translucent yellow. If it's a red or a black grape, it'll change to that color as well. So post veraison, you're starting to look at your sugars start to accumulate, and your acidity starts to drop out. So if you wait till tomorrow, or you wait till next week, you are going to sacrifice some of your acid for some sugar. And so it's really important to keep that in mind. Now, obviously, if your pH is way too low, that yeast can't ferment, or the taste would be terrible, there's not a decision to be made there. Sometimes you look at the numbers and you say, oh, we're a week out, we're 2 weeks out. And so those are more easy. With Petit Manseng, sometimes you don't have to say, oh, I want to wait until we get to 23 bricks and we're not going to have any acid left, but we can change that in the winery. Or, oh, I don't know that this is going to actually accumulate enough sugar, so maybe we have to think about what style these grapes need to be made into. You'd never have that issue with Petit Manseng. It always gets you as much sugar as you would possibly want and more acid than you'll ever need. And so some of that, you just rather than sacrificing one for the other, you have to say, this is a time when we don't have too much of either of those things. And then you have to think accordingly. You have to act accordingly when you're processing it in the winery. So if the pH is too low, you could crush into stem, leave it on the skins. As you extract things from the skin, you will get more aromatics, you'll get some texture, your color will get darker, but you'll also start to raise your pH, and maybe that is something you want in this varietal. It's not particularly something you would be looking to do with most of your red grapes. They already will have a high pH, or other, Viognier. Viognier is sometimes blended with Petit Manseng. They're both very aromatic, but one has really great acid, and one has really terrible acid. Viognier is not known for having big acidity, so that they can complement each other pretty well. So I don't know that there's it's a very different spot when you're trying to make your decisions for harvest. And then on top of all of that, even in perfect conditions, it's a hard decision to make. But sometimes you have to say, is my crew available to pick? Is there a hurricane coming up the host? This stuff grows really well in southwestern France, kind of close to Spain or towards Bordeaux or southern France. If you go 500 miles south of there, you're in the Sahara Desert. If you go 500 miles south of here, you're in the Gulf of Mexico. And that creates two very, very different conditions for not only growing the grapes themselves, but also your harvest seasons can look very, very different.
And the winds and everything. Yeah.
You got it. Yeah. That is something that we always have here in the Valley, especially at these higher altitudes. You get wind all the time, and that too is a real double-edged sword. You can it helps keep your grapes dry. It helps keep things nice and clean, but sometimes it can also be fairly damaging to a vineyard.
Yeah.
Or to your roof, or all sorts of other things.
So for someone who has never had Petit Manseng, can you compare it to another variety that they might be familiar with? Compare or contrast. Like, for example, like I say, if you don't like Chardonnay, try Godello. But even if you like Chardonnay, try Godello. I use those two in a compare or contrast.
Sure. I think that you should try all of the grapes and just really explore and find out what you like. I think that Petit Manseng, as I was saying earlier, it is such a complex wine that is so full of so many things happening that it can be really fun and exciting, both for a connoisseur as well as somebody who is very, very, very new to wine. When I first started getting into wine, when I was younger, I was always much more of a beer drinker. I didn't really care about wine. It was not of much interest to me. But of all the grape varietals out there, the one that really grabbed my attention was Traminette, which is a hybrid of Gewürztraminer. And so there are some really beautiful Gewürztraminers out there. But the thing that just really got me was that it wasn't subtle. There was a lot happening, and it just really grabs your attention. And then I moved from there into more subtle varietals, even more neutral grapes that kind of show more the hand of the winemaker or show the site that it comes from that I think are really exciting. To me, Petit Manseng is just a ton of fun, just for everybody. It's a fun one to produce. It is very challenging, but in the glass, it's definitely a fun varietal for everybody. As for what varietals would I compare it to, I don't really have a very good one. Although somebody one time made a comment that in a lot of ways it's kind of like a high octane Riesling, and so what they meant by that was, as I said earlier, just tons of acid, and so because of that, even a little bit of residual sugar, you might not even notice it very much. Now, I haven't had a lot of Rieslings that are 14.7% alcohol, but at the same time, it's really big aromatics. It's Riesling there's nothing neutral about it. A lot of big flavors and big aromas that can come out at you. And so if you like Riesling and wouldn't mind something that's even bigger and maybe more assertive, this might be something for you.
I think that's a good comparison too, because as you were saying, you can make this in all sweetness levels. It can be very dry, and it can just go up the line with residual sugar. And then you have that acidity balance. So you might not even know it is 1% residual sugar because it's so high in acidity, it balances it out. And that's very similar to Riesling.
Absolutely. You know, this bottling, the 21, I would call more of like a demi-sec. It's something that's got some, it would be a really nice table wine or a wine to have with dinner. Dry wines can also be very, very big and beautiful as well. And then you can also have dessert wines. And here in Virginia, two of the most common ways to make dessert wines, we don't do ice wine the way they do it in New York or in Ontario. Instead, we pick it at optimal ripeness, and then we freeze it, and then make it with some frozen grapes. The other way to do it that we did it for the first time this year, and I know others this is not an original thing, but you take your grapes and you leave them in their lugs, and you put them in a tobacco barn. And a tobacco barn is a big drying shed that has a fan and a heating element and a dehumidifier so that it makes the space really, really dry. And you come back, a day later and it's, 1 degree Brix higher. And then like a week later, it's like 10 Brix higher. And so then you are working with berries that instead of 25% sugar, they're at 35 or 40% sugar. And when you process those, not only does it concentrate that sugar, it concentrates all of the flavors and all of the aromas and all of the acids too. And so it can make a really beautiful after dinner drink. Something that if I were having it, I wouldn't pair it with a dessert at all. I would let it be the dessert. Okay. If you absolutely require food, have some cheese and some almonds with it, and that's enough.
Almost like an Amarone style.
Yes. I would say more like a Von Pie, where you are you're dehydrating, but the point is still to make you take it farther than an Amarone. In that Amarone, I don't believe that the grapes would get to quite the same level of sugar. Okay. And you certainly wouldn't have that level of residual sugar in the finished product.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we talked about in the vineyard, but when you're processing Petit Manseng, and when it's aging, are there any concerns there? Like, is it prone to reductiveness? Is it, I find a lot of very aromatic wines are wonderful, upon opening or whatever, but they lose their aromatics very quickly. It's not like a wine that can hang out for a while, Mm-hmm. Is there any concerns in the processing and in the aging of Petit Manseng that we need to be concerned with or pay attention to?
So I've had Petit Mansengs that have been open for several days, and they still have some pretty good verve to them. They, we make our Petit Manseng in a pretty oxidative style. So when we press everything out, or now that we don't crush, but we do to stem, so that we're able to get more juice out. We don't use dry ice in the press pan. We'll put some CO2 in the tank so that it doesn't just sit there and oxidize while the juice is settling. But once the juice is settled, we move that juice to barrels, and we don't fill those barrels up with CO2 first. They kind of they're introduced to oxygen in a fairly passive manner.
Like a micro.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Almost like a micro oxygenation.
Well, no, you're not doing like a micro-ox sort of situation where you are giving like a measured dose of oxygen to a wine to help soften it. I just mean that we're just kind of letting.
Oh, you're just putting it in the barrel. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, you got it. You got
it.
But then you are fermenting in a porous vessel. And then you are aging that wine in a porous vessel for, usually until the following summer. And so you have to pull out the bung and add a liter of white wine every month. And so it is exposed to oxygen throughout its life. And so I guess in that barrel, it is getting some micro ox. But yeah, it's not a wine that even after a couple of days has really fallen too flat in my book.
Okay.
Typically speaking, but yeah, that can be a concern depending on the style you're doing with other varietals. I will also say some people make kind of lean into that tropical punch style a bit more than we do, and maybe they do theirs all in stainless steel, and so that might be more of a concern there.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of food would you pair with Petit Manseng, and what is your favorite?
So I really love pate with it.
Mm-hmm.
I just really love like aromatic whites and some fat meats. I think that goes really well. One of the challenges to a wine like this is that because it is not a subtle wine that has a lot of space to work with other things, it can be a challenge to pair, similar to Viognier, but with I'm sorry, I've distracted myself. Yeah. But like Viognier does not have a lot of acidity, and so with a wine like this, acid is your friend when you're looking for a good food pair. It's one of the reasons that sparkling wine seems to go with everything. That not only is it picked early and it still has some fresh acid to it, but that effervescence mimics acidity on your palate, so it really seems to go well with everything. Here, by having that kind of tropical flavor going with something that's fat and rich, like a pate, I really do enjoy that. Or anything that has some good salt to it. So again, you could have a number of appetizers like that.
And I'm thinking also any residual sugar that have that hint of sweetness.
Yeah,
it would be good for something spicy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you wanted to have something like this, just like with a Riesling, Southeast Asian food would be really great.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. So some heat in the dish does not always go well with a lot of different wines, but for this, I would say that would always have kind of a cooling effect to it.
Yeah.
Great idea.
And so talking about Riesling and Viognier, those two grape varieties very much have a wide range of expression depending on where they're grown. So like, could you compare what you think like your Petit Manseng would taste like versus, maybe the ones in Arizona that have a different complete profile of soils and stuff? What do you think changes, and are you aware of any changes depending on where it's grown and how it's expressed?
Sure. I think that the idea of terroir shows itself a lot in wine, and it works really well for what we do. But even your in somebody's neighborhood, somebody here might grow tomatoes differently than somebody over here, and it's not that people are being jerks or people are just being pretentious about their tomatoes. It's just that they're paying attention that their backyard tastes different than their backyard, and so I would say that like most wines, anything grown in Arizona is certainly going to be different than where we are. I don't think Arizona has been hit with any hurricanes lately, but they
they have those monsoons though.
Didn't they have what was it? The river,
the atmospheric river.
The atmospheric river.
Yeah. The term of 23 and 24 is atmospheric river.
No, but you're right. When you grow things here in the valley, they taste different than they do on the other side of the Blue Ridge. And so I have friends who are wine growers here in the valley that if you go north, that you're still in the valley an hour from here. And I have friends who a half hour from here, if you go east, are outside of the valley, and their wines taste much farther removed than those of us who are still here in the same region. So the Shenandoah Valley is the largest AVA in the state of Virginia. It might be the biggest AVA on the East Coast, but it's the oldest, it's the highest, it's the driest. But anyway, so our stuff here tastes different than it does in Charlottesville, and Charlottesville is less than an hour away. So the way that it presents itself here is that we usually have things that are a little bit, I wouldn't say delicate, because that's not how I mean. And it's not that they're weaker, but they do have usually greater acidity, maybe not as high of alcohol as you'd find over near Charlottesville. And that's all here in Virginia, And then if you go up to Northern Virginia, they have even lower elevation. It's close to DC, and DC has a very, very low elevation. We've really come to a time now that Virginia has shown itself to not be very monolithic. Like, there are just so many different areas. And, I don't need to tell anybody in California about how varied a state can be. But, to look at the East Coast and West Coast, the American Southwest, which I was really fortunate. My son and my wife and I got to go on an RV trip to Zion, down to the Grand Canyon.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was really cool. But yeah, Arizona is a very, very, very different place than here. And so I would love to try some of those wines. My wife and I did get to go to California a few months before the pandemic. And my former assistant got a job in San Luis Obispo, and so went to go visit him, and obviously see all the other wineries in the area. And so we brought a case of wine out just to kind of share with other winemakers and whoever. And the ones that everybody was the most interested in was Petit Manseng, because while we were out there, the only place that I found Petit Manseng was at Topless Creek.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
He would have it. Yes.
Yep.
So how popular,
they do a lot there.
How popular is Petit Manseng in Virginia?
I think very,
very, very popular.
Yeah. So like some other grape varietals like Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, Viognier, I think if you just went to a place that didn't enjoy a wine region the way that Virginia has, those grapes might not be as familiar to a lot of everyday wine drinkers, just people who just drink wine at the grocery that they get from the grocery store, or maybe from a local shop. But here in Virginia, those all mean something, and people ask for them by name. And I think that you do get a certain amount of traction for Petit Manseng. People are pretty excited about it, and people are excited to try not only Petit Manseng from here, but they always ask for it at different wineries. And so that way they're able to say they have favorites, styles that they prefer, and I think it's a really cool thing. It's not just oh, I love Chardonnay and I hate Chardonnay. It's right. It's people looking for grapes that wine professionals are discussing. How is it pronounced?
Right.
And they're still interested in exploring it more. And I think that's fun. It's not like we have gotten to a place where we're like, this is our identity and this is it. If you go to Bordeaux, it's really fun, but like, I sure hope you like Merlot. Oh, you like Cab? That's on the other side, but that's it. Nobody's doing just growing whatever they want. And here in Virginia, we still have that, and I think that's really cool.
And how much Petit Manseng do you have under vine?
We've got 1 acre.
1 acre, that's it?
That's
out of how many?
We are currently managing 27 acres.
Oh,
yeah. About 20 acres of it is our own. Every once in a while, you'll have somebody who will come to you and they'll say, we might be interested in starting a vineyard, or they might be interested in starting a winery. And we always ask them right up front, do you want us to talk you into this or out of it? Because we'll do either one
either
of
way,
those
yes.
really, really well. I can really talk you into it or out of it. And so we've had two friends and neighbors who were really interested in having a vineyard. So if that's the case, we said, we'll help you with it. And so we managed some Muscat and some Vidal for one neighbor, and another has Merlot and Petit Verdot. And we also have neighbors that we do custom crush for, where they bring us fruit and we make it into wine. I'm sorry, it's called contract winemaking in Virginia. It's not custom crush. You gotta make sure you're not engaging in custom crush. It's a different thing.
Different thing. Okay.
Yeah.
And beside Tablas Creek, do you know anywhere else where it's grown beside Virginia?
I think that there are some producers both in North Carolina as well as Maryland that I've heard of, but I would not want to start naming them in case that I'm wrong on who's
That's
doing
fine.
them.
No, fair enough.
But yeah, it's not a super widely planted thing. If you went online and started searching databases of distributors, I don't think you'd find a lot in people's portfolios. But here in Virginia, it is like the local thing that you ask for.
All right. Very cool.
Yeah.
And so you talked a little bit about it when you were talking about the acidity, how the yeast are coming in and they're having a tough time with that, and the acid, the sugar levels, they going out. It's mostly seen, Petit Manseng, you see it as a sweet or a liquor-like wine. Do you think it's just because of the processing, or you think that little bit of sugar in there helps tame some of those, I have not tasted it, but in my head, I've got like that cartoon character that's got like the hair sticking up or whatever of like acid on this wine. I could be completely wrong, but why is it mostly a sweet wine?
I think that the answer to that is kind of two-pronged. The first is that sometimes the wine will decide what it's going to do, and we study and we read and we try to learn as much as we can about the winemaking process, and then we get our one chance to do it every year, and we employ all those things that we've learned. And yeast giving up on you could be a ton of things. Maybe they don't like the environment. Maybe they're not getting enough air. Maybe it's too cold. Maybe it's too hot, which can also happen. It could be too much acidity. Maybe not enough nitrogen, or maybe the nitrogen source that you're giving it is the wrong kind of nitrogen. I mean, somebody once said that grapevines are kind of like people. Like they're wildly strong and resilient and incredibly fragile at the same time. Like somebody can fall out of an airplane and somehow survive, and somebody else has an abscessed tooth and then they're dead in a week. And same thing for grapes, and the same thing for yeast. Sometimes they can be really fickle. But I think that given kind of the 1-2 punch of there's too much sugar here and there's too much acid, like those two things together can be the biggest challenge to fermenting to a fully dry. And you can harvest your grapes early so that you don't have so much sugar, but then your flavors aren't quite as developed,
right,
and you also have even more acid. So that can be a challenge. You can get fruit in California easily that gets to 25 bricks or much higher, but it probably doesn't have a pH of 3.05,
right?
Which is tart. That is really tart stuff. and so that can be a little overwhelming for yeast.
Yeah.
But it does seem to work out in the glass.
Do you think you'll plant more Petit Manseng?
If enough people buy Petit Manseng and we are running out of it year after year, sure. Okay. I would love to. I love working with it. It is right outside of our house. It is the nearest vine to our front door is a Petit Manseng. It's flat on one side of our block, and the other side of it kind of makes a big curve around my wife's garden and our chicken house. So sometimes we let the birds free range, and they always like to go out to the Petit Manseng and start eating them, and I have to go chase them off and get them to go back to the garden and start eating whatever my wife is growing. But yeah, it's great. We love it here. We do seem to have enough demand for it. It's something that we want to see. If enough people are buying it, that we run out, then we would be interested in planting more. I think it's true for almost all of our varietals.
And do you have room for expansion on your property, or you would need to?
Right now we have some. Okay. We've probably got 5 acres left that we could plant. Okay. But at the same time, if I don't know that we're looking to plant anything new, but if we were going to expand anything, we do have some space to expand what we're already working with. Yeah.
And before we let you go, we just wanted to, is there anything that we forgot to ask about Petit Manseng, or things that you want our listeners to remember? If you forget everything else in the world, what are you going to remember about Petit Manseng?
I think we've covered Petit Manseng pretty well. I would say about me personally and working with something like this, where do you learn about Petit Manseng? And Petit Manseng is tough because, you don't have a global community of people who grow it. If I have questions about Chardonnay, Google will tell me anything I want to know. Same thing with Merlot or Cabernet, but this is something that is pretty niche wine to be working with. And so because of that, it's really amazing to be a part of the Virginia winemaking community that we are a part of. If I have questions about how do you make it, or how do you grow it, or what are you looking for? I know somebody who's making this into a sparkling wine. I wouldn't even know where to begin to work with something like this to make a product like that. I think it's enough of a challenge just to be making a still wine. And I love sparkling wine. I love producing it. I would drink it every day. But that is some real tightrope walking stuff there. But because I'm part of this industry, I get to have those conversations with people. And then specifically here in the Valley, we have our own set of challenges and things that we can do really well, or things that come up every year, and we have to figure out how to work around. And so because of that, I don't know of other industries that are so tight knit and who really live every day with the rising tides lift all boats sort of mentality that Virginia and the Shenandoah Valley does. It's a really awesome world to be a part of. And so because of that, I'm able to work with something really fun like Petit Manseng.
Great. So where can people find you? Where can people find Bluestone Vineyards online, social media? How about if they want to come visit?
Yeah. So we are in Rockingham County, which is in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. There are actually 2 Shenandoah Valleys in the United States. One's in California. One is here And so there was actually kind of a legal battle over the name, and the courts decided that we are the Shenandoah Valley AVA, and California is just the Shenandoah AVA. So be sure to look for Shenandoah Valley AVA. Online, we are at bluestonevineyard.com. We are also, there's a Bluestone Vineyard Instagram and Facebook page. If you want to follow just what I do and you're just interested in the production side of things, of turning dirt into grapes and grapes into wine, you can follow me. My Facebook page is Lee, Winemaker on Facebook. So that's mostly like pictures of things that are actually happening before bottling. If you're interested in stuff happening after bottling, Bluestone has all that stuff taken care of as well.
Awesome. Fantastic. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day.
Yeah.
On this nice, what are we in? We're in February these days.
Yes.
February day. Well, it's tough. We're having spring weather here, daffodils are coming.
We've had some warm weather lately, but today is a really nice drizzly day, a perfect day to hang out on a discussion online and drink some wine.
There you go.
Yeah, it is a perfect day for that. But
I'll be drinking in a little bit of time. It's only 11. It's a little after 11. I gotta recover a bit from yesterday, and then I'll start again.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. And
thank you so much.
Hopefully, I'll get down there. I'll get down there later on this fall, and come knocking on your door.
Awesome. Well, if you do, please do reach out. I'd love to show you around. That'd be awesome.
I will. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you.
Bye-bye.